Let's now join one of my very, very favourite panels on the Bolt Report, and that is, of course, former Victorian Liberal Party President Michael Kroger and former Labor Senator Stephen Conroy. How are you both, gentlemen?
Very well, mate. Very well.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Stephen. How? Captain Cook has been cancelled. Here we go, yet again. So he's been axed from the historic trophy awarded to the winner of Australia versus England Test matches and replaced with former Indigenous Wallabies captain Mark Ella and an Englishman called Mobbs. So it's the Ella Mobbs trophy now. Stephen, are you a fan of this decision?
Well, look, I'm a huge fan of Mark Ella. Unfortunately, I don't know the British player, but I think Mark Ella was just an absolute rugby legend. I'm not sure if Cook ever played, so I'm comfortable with it being a trophy that represents, you know, one of Australia's, and I'm presuming one of the English players' greatest players. So I'm comfortable on that basis. I think there's plenty of other issues around the wokeism that I'm sure we're going to talk about, which, you know, we can point to and say these are just, you know, lunatics running the asylum. But on this one, I'm very comfortable. I am just genuinely a huge fan of Mark Ella. I think he's a fabulous icon of Australian sports and rugby in particular.
I think no one would disagree with that, Michael. I guess the bigger point is, you know, Captain Cook was probably a great bloke as well. I'm sure he had his fans, whether he could play or not. He did, you know, kind of discover Australia. What's your take on it?
I don't think he played for the Galloping Greens, though. I mean, seriously, Mark Ella, I think you're being too generous to poor Captain Cook there. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
So Rowan, Cook represents Britain, where he came from, obviously, and Australia, in the sense that he came here in 1770 and was the first European to, you know, effectively chart the eastern seaboard of Australia and land here. If you start cancelling Cook, you know, no historical figure, black, white, African, Australian, Britain, American, no historical figure will ever survive a retrospective look at what happened 250 years ago. No one can. Times were different. Events were different. And as I've said to Andrew before, in 30 or 40 years' time, they'll look back on this era of 2022 and 2021 and say this was the era of the fascists' takeover of the language of the Western nations, where they shut down dissent, shut down free speech, dishonoured heritages, you know, ignored achievements by Western nations, and basically wrote of all these great Western nations, they're racist, they're sexist, they're to be vilified. So that's what will happen in 30 years' time when they look back on our generation. And in the same way that it is what it is now, we can't go back 200 years and try and write off everyone who was involved in any kind of public office at that time, because everyone will be disinherited, everyone will be cancelled, and that's just an absurdity. History is what history is.